In 3, 2, 1. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them. Well, folks, that's right. We've got a great show for you tonight. Maybe a little Conan action. But before we get into that, I did want to let you all know that Jim and I recently saw wrong button. Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. And there'll be a See It or Skip It review somewhere around here. But yeah, let's get into this show and, not just Conan the Barbarian, but the 1982, the OG, that classic of sword and sorcery, and asking ourselves if it holds up. But let's first, the log line. This is the one from IMDb. A young boy, Conan, the eponymous Conan, becomes a slave after his parents are killed and the tribe destroyed by a savage warlord and sorcerer, Thulsa Doom. Wait a second, folks. Thulsa Doom. Anyway, and now I think it's time to bring on my co-host with the most, who's going to tell us who's in it, Jim?
First of all, am I Conan the Unmuted?
Yes, you are unmuted.
Sorry.
And
I just had an incident with my door. That's awesome.
Anyway.
Just 1 second. Very
Okay.
Conan-like.
Well, all right. Anyway, put Jim back on mute. Yeah, folks, we're really excited about tonight. Really excited about hearing what everyone thinks about Conan the Barbarian, the 1982 version. So, you know what? We started really late. We had some technical difficulties. Not the first time with the internet and all. But hey, when you get a chance, make a comment down below. Love to hear what you think about this flick. All right. I think my co-host is back. Jim, tell us about...
Into the study.
Say
here.
that again. You're muted.
Sorry, Thulsa Doom just tried to kill me. I think he was bursting into the study here. But so the folks responsible for this, it was directed by John Milius, written by John Milius and a young man by the name of Oliver Stone.
Who's that?
Exactly. I wonder if whatever became of that guy. Starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, James Earl Jones, of course, Sandahl Bergman, who won a Golden Globe for her performance, Ben Davidson, a young surfer.
That's Valeria, correct?
Yeah, I believe so. Jerry Lopez, who is a surfing pro as a teenager, and the MASH standby Mako. If you remember him,
yes.
Who played about 4 different roles in
Very
MASH,
much so.
as well as a one-scene hit for a couple days of work for Max von Sydow there, so amongst a few other people. But
Osric, right?
Yes, yeah. But it was like one scene, I believe. And it was So interesting cast anyway, and I think it was Arnold's first major dramatic role, because he'd of course been in Pumping Iron and that kind of thing. So
I think we can put drama on.
Yeah, exactly.
Bit of air quotes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, Jim. Before we get into the spoiler zone, let's just get it out there right now. do you think it holds up? And your single best reason for or again?
I actually don't think it holds up particularly well. I think pacing's an issue, and in it, something about it feels lumbering. The best thing about it is Sandahl Bergman, I think, and I not just because she's a beautiful young woman, but she actually gives it some life. But yeah, I don't think it holds up.
You know what, Jim? I'm going to agree with you. It's such a, as much as I enjoyed myself at times in this flick, there are parts of it that are just straight up offensive. Like it's embarrassing. I've got other reasons why I think it doesn't hold up, but yeah, it's total John Milius.
Yeah, yeah,
And all his worst instincts. All right. With that out of the way, I think it is time
For the spoiler zone.
And Jim, why don't we start from this perspective?
Sure.
Was there any parts of it that you enjoyed?
You know, like I said, when Sandahl Bergman comes in, almost everything she does works. For me, what I found surprising, and I was sort of looking forward to it, I thought this is going to be a big, trashy, Frank Frazetta-y, posy, kind of super physical thing. And she sort of embodied all of that. She's a former dancer, of course. She was one of the muses in Xanadu, for those who might not know. But she was a dancer, and she shows that physicality. There was a scene when they're infiltrating some fort or something, and she's got her back straight and her sword out. And I thought, she's the most physical person here, despite Arnie's size. So I enjoyed watching her. She's got that kind of girl from the smoking patio who's still nice to you vibe, but there's something about her performance, and even when she sort of appears as Gandalf the White at the end, even that sort of worked. I wish she had more time, in that sparkly outfit. That she sort
As
of
a Valkyrie.
Yeah, that was pretty sweet. So, she seemed to be having the most fun, and she was definitely the one to watch. I know it was, a lot was on Arnie and stuff for the role, but, he had moments, but it wasn't as bad as I remembered him, or he wasn't as wooden as I think I remembered him being, but, there's just something about pacing. There's 3 minutes spent on, is this coffin going to catch on fire? And it just sort of, it didn't really move very, very, very well. I didn't.
Okay, well, maybe that's from a story perspective. You've mentioned it before, but maybe you could elaborate on that. It's 2 hours and 7 minutes. What do you, when you say pacing, what do you mean? Can you give a couple of specifics?
Yeah, there was just a lot that there were a lot of scenes that nothing really happened, but it was sort of stretched out. At one point Conan's literally crucified. I thought it was just sort of one of those tie the ropes to the tree, but he's actually nailed to the tree.
The tree of woe.
The tree of woe, yes. And so they sort of deal with that, but everything's so heavy, and it's just got such heavy movements. There's nothing that sort of, Star Wars, to pull a random example, Star Wars trips fairly lightly over what it has to do. It's, hey, let's go from point A to point B, and that's handled pretty lightly. But this one is it's a lot of work, and it just feels lumbering, kind of. And the fight, that's a whole other thing. But, the coffin catching on fire, for instance. The coffin won't catch on fire from there. It seemed to go on. It was probably only about 2 minutes, but it seemed to go on forever. And then it caught on fire. And then it caught on fire some more. And then the music crescendoed. And then more fire. And it just we get it.
Well, and lightning. Lightning sounds.
Yes, yeah. I guess that was some form of transformation, maybe related to.
And I'm wondering if it had something to do with the witch earlier.
Yeah, yeah,
maybe.
yeah,
Don't want to
the
get
witch
too
that,
deep in the lore.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
What about, and again, more just thinking from an enjoyment aspect. Did it in any way remind you of Lady Hawk, another
Yeah,
80s fantasy film that we saw, where, if memory serves now that I'm thinking about it, there seemed to have been a lot of, all right, now we'll go here. And here's a long, wide shot of a castle.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it did. It did feel like that. Like it was sort of, I don't want to be too dramatic, but it was disappointing in the same way. Like it's like, oh, that's, you have this, you've been given license to portray the dramatic story of Conan the Barbarian. We all know the imagery and literally the Frank Frazetta drawings and everything's, arms are out and legs are
Very
out.
heavy metal.
Very heavy
Yeah.
metal, women and beasts and bad guys and heads coming
Blood
off
and
and things.
swords and
There is a bit of that, but yeah, I just for something that I expected to be so physical, there was so many tight shots of action, and it was all so cumbersome. And not even the helmets looked sort of heavy and plastic, and there's nothing sort of streamlined about this movie. I thought that to sum it up in a sentence is that there's nothing that sort of went was streamlined. Like literally went from point A to point B really quickly, and yeah, it was just it kind of come on, let's get on with it. Let's get some action. There's a couple times when I thought, oh, okay, now here we go. I'm looking forward to this, and then it would just sort of taper off after a couple of minutes. But
So-
yeah.
I mean, what about, like, I was surprised, Jim, at how much I had moments of real, boy, that music cue is just, it's like, it reminded me of, or it evokes something. And it had to have been one of the highlights. Not that there were many, but for me, one of the highlights of the film was the soundtrack, that theme.
Yeah.
Was there, what else? There's times I was watching it and I really did. I'm like, when you're talking about the helmets, most of what you're talking about seems to me, and even as I was watching it, when you do a lot of that walking and that, it's because you don't have money to have a nice big set piece.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
it looked, and this might not be fair, but Dino De Laurentiis, it looked like, his family and the way they, you know what, when they were given a project, Dune, it's kind of cheap, like they're doing a spaghetti Western, but unlike a spaghetti Western where you really can have just one guy and a horse, and, you get to, you're evoking something even if you've got nothing. Here, it's like, it's not a Western. I expect more going on and faster and it looking better.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Does that ring true to you?
No, and I get it. I think one of the, you're talking about the music. I think for me, and this is always...
That was the one good thing before. Well, and there's other good things, but crap on it.
I like the locations. I think, and evidently it was filmed in the sort of Madrid region, the area around Madrid in Spain, out in the countryside, of course. And during an attempted coup in 1981.
I thought I saw the ghost of Franco.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's not those would be haunted lands, really, at that point in time. But so I was like, where the hell is this place? You saw the sort of various rock formations, and it turned out to be Spain. And apparently that was the cheapest place. They figured in this one article I'd read in El País, the English version, that it would cost 19 million pounds in Spain, 40 million if it was shot in Italy, and 60 million if it was shot in the States. So they went with this location, which but it did well. A lot of those great desert landscapes, and a lot shot during the golden hour, of course.
Yeah, but like you said, Jim, what are you doing with it?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like
you
if
could have a story on that
if you're
landscape.
you're not saving money on that landscape. It's not the landscape they're saving money
Yeah.
on. That landscape's in a number of countries. They're saving it not just on non-union labor, but
Yes.
on the production values themselves. Like this is, and some of it's like, Jesus, we had, what, a year, 2 years before, The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing, or maybe it was even at the same time.
About the same
About
time, maybe.
about the same time, and that's some gory ass effects. They're making all that stuff work, you know, on a tight budget out in the wilds of BC, of British Columbia, here in Canada, for some of that, and in the States. And so it's like, yeah, I think of Dune, like the 80s version of Dune, and that kind of sort of like it's still the 70s. It's still pre-Star Wars 70s. And yeah, it just doesn't work. Like, I mean, yeah, the location, what a great
Yeah.
place to visit.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to this boring movie we're watching.
Yeah.
What did you think of some of the performances? Yeah, it was one of Arnie's early things. There are some times where you see that you see the magic, you see why he's Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he's still kind of learning how to be physical on
Yeah.
in a set, on a set, in camera. But yeah, James Earl Jones, Mako, like some of these folks, what did you think of their performances? Did they look game, or was it like, oh, this is a good paycheck and I'll spend some time in Spain?
Yeah, it was. I think James Earl Jones was doing a thing. Like he seemed sort of detached, and then I don't.
I kind of
like,
thought that was on purpose, though. Like,
yeah,
he was doing
like
a bit.
He was kind of a wide-eyed. Oh, I'm a channel to another universe or dimension, and the whole turning into a snake thing that was pretty freaky at the end. So that's to give him the benefit of the doubt, he seemed to be doing something different than a kind of a mustache twirling bad guy.
Yeah.
And
And the scene before he sends him to the Tree of Woe.
Yeah.
The scene before that, you steal my property. You like it was a nice bit of like a villain's monologue, but different.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
the guy who wrote this movie, who directed it as well, he also wrote like fucking Apocalypse Now.
Yeah. They credit him for Quint's USS Indianapolis monologue in Jaws as well, I believe. So, do you feel lucky, punk, and quite an. I think they credit him with love the smell of napalm in the morning. There's a number of major lines that are credited to Milius. I think in this one it was to hear defeat your enemies. There's something else, and then hear the lamentations of their women.
Well, I think that's actually like he basically just condensed something that is attributed to Genghis Khan, but like so Milius to. Oh, this is my favorite scene. Say it, Arnie. And I suspect Arnie was enjoying saying that shit. He was a different guy. This was the Arnie of Hitler wasn't that bad a guy. He had some good ideas. Not the one now saying, hey, it's all love and,
Yeah.
I'm an old man who's learned some things and.
Yeah. And then, speaking directly to Russia and a few other things too in his video addresses last year. But in terms of the other roles, I mean, Max von Sydow seemed to be having a little bit of fun in his one scene. The others, Mako was sort of like a crazy bit of energy.
They probably just drove.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll be there tomorrow.
exactly, exactly. And then they had all these kind of like the one that played his mom, I believe, was like this Polish Russian.
Nadiuska.
Yeah,
Tragic
model.
backstory.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
and
later story.
yeah,
Same with playing the daughter, French actor, the princess, the rescued princess. She passed away young, 31, car accident
Yeah.
in Normandy.
yeah, yeah. So a lot. The cast was like from a lot of corners of the world, it seemed. But again, I think that Sandahl Bergman seemed to be having the most fun, and she seemed to be the most alert, and I think she won the Golden Globe not for Best Actress, but for Best New Performer or something to that effect. I can't remember the actual title, but
Sorry, I'm going to say it.
threw it on the Pia Zadora shelf.
Some Golden Globe award.
Golden Globe, yeah, exactly.
Her performance is solid, and you're right, she did. She played the part well, and that Milius gave her the line, "You want to live forever." Maybe not delivered the best as possible, except when she was the Valkyrie at the end. Where it was like, oh, that's a solid moment.
Yeah.
Before we get into it, before we get into the meaning of it all, such that it is, wanted to revisit Nadiuska, who played Conan's mom. And I mean, who knows? She had an interesting career, and then mental health issues, diagnosed with schizophrenia. Apparently, has been homeless more. She's now in a home for the mentally ill. But I got to admit, at the beginning, I was like, "Now that'd be a movie I'd see." Like, she had a great presence.
Yes, yeah.
And at the beginning, it's like, yeah, there'd be a movie. Conan's mom.
Yeah. A little prequel?
And not a prequel. Hey, instead of her losing her head, you just think she's dead. And then adventures, the adventures of Conan's mom.
Have a Tarantino rewrite of it. This didn't really
Why
happen.
not?
She had another head.
You know what? Other people thought she lost her head.
Yeah.
Or you could do like a kind of feminist parody or feminist satire of it. Oh, they're always saying they lost their head. Women losing their head.
Yeah.
That said, enough of the parts we can enjoy, which also, I got to admit, the black and white kind of weird camouflage.
Yeah, that was
I
cool.
was like, I was watching it, and although the makeup doesn't hold up, it doesn't look as cool in 4K. In what was actually a pretty good, well, it wasn't 4K television, but HD. But it looked like a good transfer. It sounded good. It looked good on screen. But Jim, oh Jim, oh my goodness. Dragon Movie Guy in the chat.
I have not been checking.
Where was I on this?
The makeup.
The
4K,
makeup
the transfer,
doesn't hold
yeah.
up, but they look cool.
Yeah, totally cool.
You know what? All of them look cool.
And there was a neat little
Mako
moment.
sounded cool. Like, I do remember that voiceover, especially at the beginning, because that's what we're hearing, actually. My lord, and he made king by his own hand and all that stuff. You could kind of get a vibe when you weren't watching the cheaping out on screen. You could kind of get where Milius wanted to go and the vibe he was going for. And there were times where it's like, I could see why I enjoyed this as a kid.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. At the
There's
same time, you remember it, but you don't remember it.
Yeah.
Does that make
The
sense?
middle.
You know,
No,
it's
often
not-
the middle parts,
Yeah.
going from, it's like, what happened in the middle hour? I remember this part and that part, but
yeah, you don't remember, and that's a weird thing when we're talking about what makes a memorable movie. This is a memorable movie, and not because it's awful, but it's certainly not that good.
yeah, yeah.
There
There was a sweet little moment with the camouflage, just as you bring it up, because Sandel Bergman's applying the camouflage to Arnie, sort of, lovingly, and then the archer is doing it by himself and kind of sneering at them both. I just thought that I'd never picked up on that before. It was kind of a neat little moment there.
those little subtle adult moments at
Yeah.
15 when this thing came out.
Yeah,
Not going to the
Kids are-
movies.
yeah.
Still resenting the fact that I have to get bus fare.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, you know what? Let's get into the meaning of it all. The meaning of it all, Jim. What what do you think Milius's point with this is? What do you think he's what do you think he wanted everyone to what was the takeaway?
Well, it's funny because it ends on a real, not a typical note for a Hollywood movie or Hollywood-ish movie. He basically defeats Thulsa Doom, James Earl Jones, cuts his head off in front of all his followers, and then throws it down the stairs. And then and then people just sort of start throwing their flames in the water, like maybe the spell's been broken.
The spells, yeah.
And they would all depart into the desert or what have you.
Wherever the hell they're supposed to go.
I kind of didn't mind. A lot of times, a vengeance storyline is often, internally shamed. Like, oh, you can't have vengeance. It leads to other things, and anger grows within you and destroys you. And you get that a lot, and sure, I get it, but it was kind of refreshing not to have that this time. Just like, vengeance is, pretty cool, especially when it works out, and you get to throw the guy's head down the stairs. And that's Milius, and I just, it's just like free and clear, consciencelessness, no, nothing hanging over you. Just like, dealt with my enemies, and then I become a king.
Job done.
Job done.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Well, he has other adventures. He's got other
Yeah.
things he does before he becomes a king. Obviously, hoping for a bigger check to do the sequel, which I believe, did they do a Conan the Destroyer?
Yes,
Yeah.
There were supposed to be 3. He was getting a
And
quarter
then
of a
that
million
awful Red
for this
Sonja.
one. $1 million for this one. And he was supposed to get $2 million for a third one, which never happened.
Yeah.
And then Red Sonja.
What about, and you make an interesting point there, Jim. Like, there's other revenge films, see, where I'm like, I don't feel good at the end of it. I kind of get sucked in because they're all revenge films kind of play on a male, or we starting to see more and more female women's ideas of, well, not ideas, like just that kind of, well, I want to feel in charge this time. I want to feel the badass, it plays on fears, really, and every memory of being undermined or belittled or whatever, you're feeling small in the pants or whatever, but they're very seductive. But at the end of it, it's like kind of, I don't feel good. Like, I don't feel good. Never mind the, this will destroy you. It's like, no, I can feel that. This is like eating too much McDonald's. One could say any McDonald's is too much, but you know what I mean?
Which brings you to our sponsor.
In this, you're right. Don't feel that out at all. Now, is it in part because it's Arnold? And I don't mean that it's Arnold. It's just this huge, big guy. Is it that it's so almost cartoony?
Yeah.
There's no, like, he's a good, he is a hero, a bit of a scoundrel. Like, I mean, it's a thief, a gladiator. I do love the job description on the poster. Just throw in orphan, slave, gladiator, thief, warrior, king. Yeah, what is it why don't we feel bad here?
You know, I think I sort of know where it comes from. My dad used to tape, it's of the age. It's not too many years after the string of Death Wish movies had
Oh,
come out. So,
yeah.
and you were mentioning the 70s earlier. This is, in a lot of ways, this feels like a 1970s movie, even though it's 1982 or whatever. And shot in
Zardos.
81. But it feels like a 70s movie, like, Charles Bronson avenging his family, again, avenging the family, and going around and just blasting the crap out of people. And I think that's sort of a little bit of the background. Like, we're talking a couple years after maybe the last, or maybe he made them still during the 80s. But they're just fully committed. There's not a lot of complexity in this. It's, you killed my family, so I'm going to get you. And there's not a lot of kind of character.
There's that
consequences.
bit, which is kind of entertaining. It's he's Conan. He can't cry, so I cry for him.
Yes, yes.
But that
Why
may
you cry?
lead to why we don't feel bad. Is in part we don't really feel that invested in his arc.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
it's how can you feel bad, like, in a good revenge film, especially one with an over the top establishing story. They're almost this was a good man who became, whereas
Yes.
in this it's like, well, it was a kid in a world where it looks like everyone was living and dying by the sword. I mean, his dad was making them. His mother looked like she could handle herself with one. Like, you're not, but mostly it's just, we never get much of his inner life, his pain
no, that's a
over
good point.
losing. It's all very stoic. And so how bad can you feel about how it plays out? You're just not that invested in anyone's. It's interesting. You mentioned the Valeria character, which is in some ways gives you something. That and a couple of his other sidekicks, the one who's crying because he can't.
Yeah.
Like, I'd feel a little bummed if he died.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of,
Yeah,
you knew she was
and-
going to die because she was the one who said, one of the weirdest story moments, I'll make the choice, which is like, wait a second, what? She is going to die. This is the one who's making the crisis moment choice.
yeah,
The heroes, they're comatose.
yeah,
Does that make
yeah.
sense, though? Maybe that's why
Yeah.
we're just not invested in general.
I was thinking about it earlier today, having watched it last night, and yeah, they don't really develop a lot of the characters. I mean, anything that you get is just from what they sort of show on the outside, but there's not. I mean, you do see his story in flashback, and but I don't think there's a single character where you really sort of know what's going on internally.
Yeah.
It's very task oriented.
Yeah.
There's that word again, and so they got their things to do and they go and do them. And
How long is it before he says a word?
It's
quite
24 minutes.
It's quite.
I think it's the
quite amount of
24th
time,
minute.
and then Crom.
Yeah, crawl.
Wow, that's hit me there.
Dear Crom.
Let's get back
Why
to the
hast
meaning
thou
for a bit,
forsaken
though,
me?
before we. What do you think Milius is? You know what? one of the great things about John Milius and this film is it's like, well, yeah, it is. I guess he had said he wanted this to be like a northern hero, a Viking hero.
Man from the North, yeah.
And it's like, none of this ever made me think of Vikings. Even at the beginning where they're in the snow and it's like, no one's dressed for this weather.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like there's some dark some dark subtext. I mean, at the beginning, a giggly 15-year-old, like teen boys, there's that moment early where, he's bred to these women, and watching it now, and it's like, that's offensive. And it's almost like John Milius. It's good he lived and died when he did. He is dead, isn't he? Pretty sure he is.
I think he's still alive, but he's got Alzheimer's now, I believe.
Oh.
There is a movie on Canopy, like a full documentary, if I hadn't mentioned it before, that's available on Canopy. And they
Yeah, no,
talk
he's
a bit
still
about
still
his
alive.
legacy.
But it's one of those things where it's like, I think of Harvey Weinstein going, oh, well, it was like back in his day, you could do this shit, you know. Although who knows, he might have given great, regardless of his ideas about women and gender and masculinity. Might have been a guy. No, totally respected me. Nothing creepy happened on our sets. It was all in front of the camera.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's. I mean, let's see what Conan does. What does the witch say? He said, "Come in for some warmth and fire," which seemed initially a little redundant, but I suppose there were two different things. Yeah. He throws a woman into the fire. She is attacking him, but
she's a witch.
He's walking down the stairs and he calls one of them sluts. There's another woman that gets in his way who isn't even a bad guy. He's going after bad guys and he pushes her out of the way.
Yeah.
In terms of other sort of depictions of masculinity, there's a priest that attempts to seduce him, and then of course he knocks him out and takes his outfit. I jokingly wrote down, every animal was hurt in the filming of this movie. The opposite of the
it's a
usual
celebration of a celebration of a fantasy masculine virtues, knightly virtues without chivalry, or with only limited, very selective applications of chivalry. And so everything that happens, fits that world of view. A kind of, there was a time when men were men, and that's this movie.
And they could punch a camel.
To knock it flat.
I was sort of hoping that the camel that he punched was the same one that he had to ride later on to get a little bit of karma.
Well,
I remember this big Austrian.
But that's the tough one with a Milius, like that. This kind of movie, it's hard to do comedy.
Yeah,
it really is difficult because, you have to make fun of the big guy, and that's not what they like doing in these.
No,
big guys don't like. It's one of those things. Nobody makes fun of me. Well, yeah, because you made it known how you're going to deal with it.
Yeah. That's true.
Is there anything else? Like, I mean, I'm glad, Jim. I'm glad we, and I think we're moving into final thoughts. I think here, right? There's just not a lot to say about this flick.
Yeah, I mean. We could talk about some of I have a campfire scene lit by car headlights. I have the camera on the two people. There's warmth and fire was the line I was looking at before. But Oh, the puppet vulture. That was kind of cute. And I should mention for all the birders out there that, yes, that was a North American common loon that you heard in the desert of a water bird that you heard in the desert of Spain. When he was walking up to the witch's village, constant loon calls, summer calls. And I don't know
That's
that
why
they
I
make
thought
it
of
over.
my parents' lake at the time, you know?
Yeah,
Back when they had a cabin up in...
common loon. Yeah. Yep.
anything else you wanted to add? Like it is, you know what, Jim? This is a weird one. There's just
Yeah.
there's just so little to say.
Yeah, well, I had the crucifixion. It takes more than 16 bullets to stop Guy Caballero when they redid the Godfather. But there was a couple things. They say, oh, the throne. I can't remember who said this. I thought I put down the throne room becomes a prison. I think it was Max von Sydow. His character said that.
Yeah.
So there's something to do with the price of having power
Well-
that they attempt to get a little bit
Yeah.
philosophical with.
Well, and there's a
that-
bit
that
of
you're
like
sort of
there's a
confined
bit
by
of
your role.
Beowulf in it. There's a bit
Yeah.
of I would say Beowulf, Tolkien. But really, you could almost argue, and this is I was thinking about it. There's mythic moments.
Yeah.
Him meeting the witch, who would be, I think, in props character archetypes, would be as a donor. She does help him, but she gives him a dispatcher. She gives him some key information. His erstwhile owner was the donor. Here, I give you my freedom.
Yeah.
But he needs a key piece of information, and she gives him that and sends him on his way. This is just an angry guy wandering around in the woods. But it made me think of the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I mean, we're picking on Milius, but he wasn't
No.
a stupid man. He was a well-educated man. I think it's one of those things where, in different hands with the right sensitivity, maybe, you could kind of try and retell the story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, via Conan, the Barbarian, and actually kind of say something. In many respects, you could say that part of the Epic of Gilgamesh is about, okay, you're kind of an asshole here.
Yeah.
Go and work that shit out before you come back to the community to actually, be less of a dick. You are the king,
Yeah.
And I think that's, if I could draw anything interesting from it, it's that, because there are these mythic moments. And, and the idea of an evil, it's Conan the Barbarian, the character, is kind of set up for telling some of these stories we've been telling ourselves for a long time. Definitely male fantasy warrior stories, but there's an opportunity here to not maybe, it doesn't necessarily to have fun with the form, but a proper critique of it, a deconstruction of it. And I gotta think, I don't think we've seen that yet, have we? Like a real deconstruction of this kind of character.
No, I don't think so. I mean, these didn't really appeal to me as comics as a kid, because I just saw, I saw Conan, I sort of dug the illustrations, that they were so fantastical. But the stories themselves, I don't think, it's one dude, it's his strength, it's not even like who was Michael Moorcock's with the sort of intelligent
Eldred?
sword?
Or
It wasn't
Elric?
even
Elric, maybe,
yeah.
yeah.
And the few times I read Elric, I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting. And they did interesting storylines, and they had interesting consequences. And the sword, it was his own sort of had its own force. But
where we're
with this
seeing
one,
it?
What's that?
The Witch Hunter.
Oh yeah, okay.
I think that's where we're, in television.
Yeah, it could be. But back in the day, these were, I mean, these were 80s, 70s, 80s comics. A lot like 70s, 80s war comics. They took themselves way too like Sergeant Fury, Sergeant Rock, Thor, Conan. These were all super serious stories,
But you see it in the film, right? Like it's
yeah,
no, not to say that a film should
ahead.
forever wink, but if you
Yeah.
look at modern comic book movies, which in many respects are like they are looking at these kinds of characters. Geez, I'm answering my earlier question. There's lots of deconstructions.
Well,
But at
I would
least,
say
these
what
comic book movies, it's the good ones
Mm-hmm.
can kind of wink at the form while at the same time. I mean, we just saw Dungeons and Dragons, which
yes, yeah, and
has them all there as archetypes.
yeah, yeah. And they're all the job description for thief is pretty pretty vague. If Conan is a thief, as well as Chris Pine, as well as Bilbo Baggins. I mean, you have quite the
Well,
quite
what
the
do you gotta steal stuff.
yeah, with a two-handed sword. But
Maybe not the quietest thief.
if it works for you, that's fine. But I would argue that the Marvel movies do quite a good job at I mean, they take everything away from Thor and they rebuild him, right? And so
Yeah.
that I guess in a certain way is doing something that
Yeah,
that we're
because he is
talking
very
about.
much the loudmouth, the Gilgamesh,
Yeah,
in the first movie, which is why he gets his hammer taken away from him and has to,
yeah. But if you
have
even
an
remember back
adventure in a foreign land.
to the comics, were you ever compelled to like pick it out of the the drugstore comic rack? I know I wasn't. I was more of a sort of a Spider-Man kind of guy.
Well, it was
But-
that and heavy metal,
yeah,
which I think did, make fun of its seriousness was the poking fun at it in a way. like Den, I love
Yeah.
the heavy metal, the movie, with John Candy as the voice.
Yeah.
Like, it was awesome.
Yeah.
And I think already then that was the time, that was our era, right? Where
Yeah.
a lot of this is all ridiculous. And even, or it was First Blood,
Yeah.
which was a lot more grounded. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could say that all works its way up, to if you've read about the early 80s, you had your your Stallones and your Van Dammes and your Schwarzeneggers, and that all led up to I think one of the reasons why Die Hard works so well is that was something different, the same kind of guy in a completely different package. With
I
vulnerabilities.
would argue a totally different guy.
Yeah, you think
Conan
so?
Conan is a capital H hero from the gods almost, right?
Yeah.
The change with and let's say Sylvester Stallone's Rambo is a damaged god amongst men, whereas that cop, he's an everyman, and that's part of what
Yeah.
made that film and films like it work. Was it's like a regular guy who's got to figure it out and has to use his brains. It's not that character. It sort of demonstrates that he can take the punches. It's not so much that he can give them, but
Yeah.
that he can take them. Boy, that guy can take a beating.
Yeah.
And it's his
glass in
suffering
the feet.
and his really regular guy wants and desires. It was
Yeah,
just
I
it's
mean,
a Christmas movie. It's like
I don't-
wants to
I
be
do-
with his kids and make up with his wife.
Yeah. I should rephrase that. I don't think it's a direct line, but I've read a few things too that say that that so all these sort of almost superheroes, but not quite, sort of led to that vulnerable hero. That there's that was maybe an answer.
Well,
to,
maybe a
to-
rejection of.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. In the same way that Spider-Man was
But
a commentary on things like Superman and Batman.
Yeah. I think we're
in its time.
we're
But anyway,
getting beyond the scope.
we're getting away.
I think it's we could have been out of here 20 minutes ago. This is not worth even the 50 minutes we've committed to this film. That doesn't mean it isn't worth watching, folks. If you've made it to the end, oh my goodness, once again, did I forget? I effing did. But look at that. Please like and subscribe. And what we'll be watching next week, who knows? That's why you need to subscribe and ring the bell. All righty, everybody. Thanks very much. Whoops, I didn't want that one. I want that one. I'm sure there'll be something interesting for you to watch there or down there or other way around. And, of course, please subscribe. Good night, everybody.
Happy Easter.
Okay.